Trump keeps saying that Panama is allowing the Chinese to operate the canal. No, the Chinese company is operating a structure that some American experts say could be retrofitted in a crisis to try to deny access in the canal. That is the actual extension, if you're as charitable as possible, to Trump's assessment that the Chinese currently run the Panama Canal. And this claim that he's making has been his basis for talking about conquests and territorial reconquistas of this land that he says 36 to 38,000 Americans perished for. They died due to malaria. They got malaria from mosquitoes and died because they were building a canal in Panama after we took that land as other powers were pushed out. And so since we gave it to them for $1, Jimmy Carter did that. And because of this Chinese company possibly operating this facility that could possibly be retrofitted to do, because of that, he's been threatening conquest. Now, could he have just privately said, hey, you need to do this or it's going to become a real diplomatic issue and I'm, at the end of this, we can go back and forth, but kinetic force. He could have, but he chose to instead just like talk about complete reconquest. And I think part of it is not only because he wants this facility to be shut down, I think it's also that Trump is probably making other demands as well. It would make sense if the Panama Canal was not ceded to the United States because the government would be, well, very unpopular with their people. And so maybe Trump starts with an opening bang like, give up Panama Canal, and then it's like, well, how about you just allow our ships to travel completely for free? Which is what I think the strategy is to push this Chinese company out and then get better terms for us, since it's much geographically closer to the United States, and the Panama Canal is pretty essential for American trade. Trump threatens this reconquista. He then sends Marco Rubio, his new Secretary of State, confirmed overwhelmingly 99-0. This is one abstention. Sends him down to Panama. He gets that ugly reception with his pictures getting burned by locals and people protesting against him as they see America just building empire in Latin America. And he has to put a pretty face on Trump's message of conquest. And so he goes down there, he talks to Panama, and Panama seems at least open to talking about the conditions of the Chinese deal and maybe withdrawing from it. So they seem open. Even though this was done with a gun barrel pointed down the face of the Panamanian people, the government still seemed willing to concede to this. They probably would have conceded to it without this public call for reconquista. At the same time, he was calling for conquests of Denmark and saying that there was a population there who actually want to be part of the United States, which absolutely just does not exist. Talking about making Canada the 51st state. He's going through all this. Marco Rubio gets down there, gets this idea from him that maybe they'd be able to make concessions. And then Trump comes out, and then he says this.
They violated the agreement. They're not allowed to violate the agreement. China's running.
This is in reference to China. That the agreement that we signed in turning over the Panama Canal for $1 is that they would not allow foreign countries to operate the canal, like, for example, American adversaries and such. And he's saying that they're violating the agreement. They really aren't. It's just there's one facility that could, in a crisis, be used to maybe violate the agreement. It's very different that they are currently violating the agreement.
The agreement, China's running the Panama Canal. That was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement, and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen.
We're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen. So he's still putting on, I mean, these conversations are already going on behind closed doors, but Trump seems insistent to lay on the public pressure continuously, asserting the idea that the United States could just take it back. And taking it back, to me, is interpreted as taking it back with the use of violent force, with the army, landing troops and putting American soldiers in harm's way to conquer the Panama Canal. Remember, guys, he was the peace president. He was the peace president. He was the person calling Harris the warmonger, the person who was lambasting John Bolton, who was going after Liz Cheney, saying, oh my gosh, look at these people campaigning with the Cheneys and such. I wouldn't do that. I mean, even though he supported the Iraq war at the start, I wouldn't do that. I'm the peacemaker. Now, he did drastically increase drone strikes during his administration and then restricted the information on said drone strikes. He did call for the public targeting of civilians if they're related to terrorists, saying we need to blow up their families. That's the only way you're going to be able to take out the terrorists. This is a guy that I would not exactly call, I mean, Soleimani, well, this is a guy that I would not call the #1 peacemaker. But he sold it on the campaign trail. Dumb schmucks on the libertarian right, and some on the American far left, but very niche. And of course, the large swath of the MAGA public, they ate it up, they ate it up, they ate it up, forgetting that he was also the fire and fury guy. And now here we are, threatening war with Panama, threatening war with Greenland, and threatening economic war with Mexico and Canada, both for possible like annexation of Canada, unlikely, but it's still the threat, which is going to bring up the prices for American consumers. Even though he said on the campaign trail that if he voted for him, the grocery prices are going to go down. And one of his first acts in office is to do something that's going to make many grocery prices go up. Hope none of you guys like Mexican tequila, okay? Even though the Mexican one was pushed down a month, the Canadian one is still supposed to take effect this week. The Canadian tariffs in retaliation are also still supposed to take place this week. And in all of this chaos and all this economic mess, while the economic segment could be its own thing, what he keeps threatening with violence in reference to this, let's just say this all blows over. The economic trade war, the violent threats, let's just say everything blows over. Best case scenario that they give some like tiny concessions. For example, the Mexicans said they put 10,000 soldiers on the border to combat drug trafficking, and Trump kicked the tariffs down a month, kicked it down the road. Like another concession like that, and then boom, it's done, you know? Let's say that happens. This is still destructive. It's not only destructive because investors are going to be scared to invest in companies that manufacture parts and then bring them into the United States, like certain car manufacturers that are working in between the United States and Canada or in between the United States and Mexico. That's going to affect jobs that are reliant on that interstate trade. Because not only because of the loss of jobs if the tariffs stay in place, but also the loss of jobs from a lack of investment or future jobs that could have been had from growth rates that did exist. We had a positive GDP growth rate. Now, if these tariffs end up going through, that'll be counteracted. But putting that aside, the violent threats that Trump are making towards Panama, towards Greenland, if he doesn't go through with them, best case scenario, this is still done, I think, a sizable amount of damage to the international community. How easy is it going to be for somebody like Vladimir Putin to stand up and say, well, if you can take back the Panama Canal because 38,000 Americans shat themselves to death in South America after getting sick, then we can take back Crimea because it's of strategic importance to us. And hell, tons of Russian soldiers and all sorts of soldiers from across Russia's historical empire and the Soviet empire have died in the peninsula. You could say the same thing about the Donbass. You could say the same thing about Sumy in 44. You could say the same thing about all of Ukraine. You could say the same thing about any number of countries that they are connected to. Thank you so much, Ben Thaman. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I don't like the logic, and I don't like the fact that this is going to be. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when this is going to be taken and thrown back in the face of the United States as a justification for the aggressive state actions of other countries, whether it would be Russia in another invasion of Ukraine or to justify its current actions, an invasion of Georgia if they decide that, hey, maybe the Dream Party's tightening grip is too much for my neck, or another coup attempt in Armenia, or who knows, an invasion of Kazakhstan, protests get up, Belarus, or maybe even a NATO state. Moldova, maybe? Not a NATO state, but still. They already have troops illegally stationed there. Or maybe it'll be the Chinese, and it'll be around Taiwan. That Chinese soldiers died taking Taiwan from indigenous people, or from, you know, other colonialists, or from whatever conflict it would be. And so they get that land, and it's strategically important to them because it's in the South China Sea. It's to their south, and it allows them to project influence and other territorial claims they have. And I'm not saying that this is the end all be all, because there's still hard power. There's still deterrence effects from building up Taiwan's defenses, or for example, aid packages that could be sent to Ukraine. But when it comes to the hearts and souls and minds argument, it's going to be very hard for an administration that is openly saying we're going to conquer Greenland because the people love us. They don't. We're going to conquer Panama because our people died there while building empire. And the Canadian, as you're saying that, it's going to be very hard for you to point the finger at anyone. And I never thought the Trump administration would be the nation that would stand up and go on these crusades. But say 4 years in the future, Trump gets unelected. You know, I mean, Trump's out. You know, his guy doesn't win. Democrats win the landslide. Best case scenario, you know, Democrats win. You know, they start legislating. They start trying to get us back on track. The damage will be done. The damage to America's reputation, the damage to America's alliance structure, the damage to America's soft power, the damage when it comes to the voids that'll be left by U.S. aid, and also the damage when it comes to normalization of this type of interstate conquest in the 21st century post-World War II. And it's not that these types of wars have not happened in the past. It's not that these types of wars haven't happened post-World War II. It's that the more you normalize them, the more they can happen, the more they can be justified, and the harder it will be to rally the international community against these egregious acts. And the more it is normalized, the more that it happens, the less stable everyone is, and the less dangerous. And the more dangerous the world is. Bad to normalize this type of behavior. And that's exactly what Trump's doing. Actively pushing for a less stable world. To rebuild long dead empire.